All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Triad Expeditions, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the long-range automotive tank that we've installed on our FJ Cruiser. This is the main tank that we're talking about, and I wanted to basically answer a couple questions that a lot of you have addressed to us. So I have some of these written down, and I do ask for a little bit of forgiveness. This is the first time I've ever self-interviewed myself for an interview, and just even setting the camera up is more challenging than I would have thought it would have been. So to get right to the questions, so the amount lost of ground clearance. So this is actually something that a lot of people asked. They wanted to know, how much ground clearance do I lose? Because you are going from a 19-gallon tank to a 30-gallon tank, and that extra capacity does have to be gained somewhere as far as a bigger tank. They do it really smart in the way that they give you more capacity, and a lot of that extra length or dimensions is in the length. It actually moves further forward in the vehicle, but it does hang down lower. And so this is more of a concern for some folks than others. In our case, we knew that we don't do a lot of rock crawling, and that the extra capacity from 19 gallons to 30 gallons was something that we were willing to give up about an inch of ground clearance. And so that wasn't really that big of a deal. I would say that this is actually one of the largest downsides, if any, to the tank itself, but we'll discuss that here in a little bit as we go on to the next question. Will my skid plates still work? So the answer to this is that our skid plates did in fact not work. We have not done the modifications necessary to allow our Ricochet skids to actually continue to work with this setup. The tank itself is integrally baffled, so it does have baffles inside, and they say that actually creates a situation where the tank is pretty tough in itself. So if you do get over a rock, it's actually going to have to be a pretty considerable rock to do any significant damage to the tank itself, or you're really going to have to be scraping. The tank is not the lowest spot on the vehicle, and we know that when you do a 3-inch lift, you're actually gaining quite a bit. And some people may say, well, yes, but I don't want to lose any of that. It's not the lowest point on the vehicle, and that's the key statement there. Your transfer case, your pumpkin, your axles, those are all lower objects on the vehicle itself. So is the tank going to rub first? Maybe, because it is in the middle. You could high center in that regard. So I really don't want to get in that too much, because I think everybody's applications are different, everybody's lifts are different, and everybody's skids are different. We plan on modifying our skids so that they will work again with our vehicle and the tank, and I don't think it's going to be that much to be able to do that. I think it's just going to be basically modifying the cross member. How much does a tank or tanks cost? And this was kind of hard for me to answer, because different vehicles, different costs, and also the fact that we decided to go with the main replacement tank and the auxiliary tank at the same time, so we were able to save a little bit on shipping. But if to answer the question, approximately $1,700 is how much you're going to pay for the tank on an FJ Cruiser. Some of them are cheaper, but for the FJ, the main tank and the auxiliary tank is about the same price, and then of course shipping will vary. My best recommendation is that you call Cruiser Brothers, which are the exclusive distributor for these tanks, long-range automotive tanks, into the United States, and let them be the ones to tell you exactly how much it's going to cost you. They will actually do a quote for you, and there's a page that actually you can submit for that quote to be returned to you. So I highly recommend you to go that route. And I guess with talking about costs, some people thought that cost was a little more than what they wanted to invest for the extra range. I think the use of the tank is going to vary as far as the importance of the modification. And just recently listening to Swell Runner, he was speaking to the fact that really your modifications are always going to change, and it's going to base from a military aspect. It's going to be based on your mission. and our mission had changed as far as where we wanted to go and how we wanted to go really out pretty far. So we'll talk about that more here in a second. Does your stock fuel gauge still function? And the answer to that is that it will still function. There's a modification that's done to the tank sending unit that will accommodate the new design of the tank. So it will give you the same readings as before, and it's a pretty easy modification to be done to lengthen the rod on that sending unit so that it represents the larger capacity. The next question is, what are the disadvantages of the larger capacity tank? And I would say that the ground clearance to me is probably the biggest disadvantage. Having the extra range, we'll get into the advantages here in a second, I believe make up for it. And then also having to do some modifications to your aftermarket skid plates is also another disadvantage. The next question is, what are the advantages of the large capacity replacement tank? So I'm really going to hit on this a bunch, that the advantages of it is, the biggest advantage is the range. So we decided to get this tank, and we're looking for some way to have more range other than just putting more fuel tanks or jerry cans or Skeptor cans on the roof of the vehicle. We already carry 20 gallons, and so to carry more than that on the roof, I knew just really wasn't an option because of the weight. A lot of folks do carry jerry cans on the top. A lot of folks carry them on the back. You can really quickly exceed that 300 pound recommendation that most roof racks will give you to allow you to put objects on the roof. And so with water being up there and then all the other things that we carry up there, I knew that really putting more fuel on the roof was just not going to be an option. So I started looking at other places, and then I quickly found that Cruiser Brothers offers these tanks, and so we're going to actually have a total of 60 gallons worth of fuel between the main tank and the auxiliary tank. And the real reason for this is that we now have a supercharger on the FJ and require premium fuel. So after doing that modification, there's always more modifications that have to be done after you do any modification. It just leads itself into the next step. We want to be able to go up to Alaska, and with that there's a limited availability of a premium fuel. But Alaska is not the only place that you can go where you're going to have a limited capability to get premium fuel. There's many other places in the United States that fit the bill, and recently we just went to Expo East, and even there we stopped at a gas station that did not actually carry any grade but just regular grade fuel, and that was a big surprise, and it was a good example. We were looking for examples like that, and we found that to be in fact the case on our way down to Expo East. Luckily we had enough fuel to get by. So that's one advantage, is obviously the range. We ran into several situations when we were out in Idaho and also Montana that we were dipping into our Skeptor cans and utilizing all 20 gallons of our Skeptor cans. And you know, when we would go up in the mountains and hit the mountain trails and pulling the trailer that we have, we do not get very good fuel mileage. So the cans easily will add a varying amount of mileage depending on what mileage you get, but for us it adds, just for this one tank, it's going to add about another 128 150 miles, which is pretty significant. A lot of people, I think, were discounting that too, that how far that really is. But if you get better fuel mileage, it's obviously going to be almost 200 miles just for the main tank, and then that's, you know, 30 gallons extra fuel with the auxiliary tank. That's going to be huge, and we're going to be doing that install soon. So that is a big advantage. Another big advantage too is just the money savings that you will be able to realize when you are going down the highway and you buy gasoline not when you need it, but when you can get it at a cheaper price. And so with having the capacity of 60 gallons, we're going to be able to shop as we go down the road for cheaper fuel. We still will be looking for those larger fuel depots, such as your Pilots, your Loves, your bigger stations that go through fuel more often, that offer premium fuel, but we'll be looking for the cheaper price, so we'll actually be able to save some money. And folks go, you know, that's that's probably pretty insignificant. But actually, on our way down to Expo East in North Carolina, coming from Ohio, we did calculations that we were going to save about $10 every time we fueled up, because we were able to be more selective on where we fueled up. So that adds up pretty quick, and especially over the life of the tank, and if you make big trips every year, instead of just basically watching the gas gauge just continually go down just as quick as possible with only 19 gallons, we actually have enough longevity that we can actually pick where we want to stop, and not when we have to pull over, just because if we don't, we're going to run out of fuel, which is pretty much the mode that we were in previous to installing this tank. We in fact, you know, neither one of us really even needed to use the restroom or even felt like we needed to take a break from our travels, but literally the vehicle needed to be filled up, and that was just never really sit well with us, because it just seemed like we were pulling over all the time. That is not the case anymore. It goes longer, to the point where we definitely are ready to pull over and stretch and take a break. So it definitely has returned the vehicle back to what you would expect from a OEM fuel tank, where a vehicle does not have bigger tires, pulling a trailer, all the extra weight that we pull. It's more of a feel of a vehicle and what you would expect to get you know, hours of travel before you have to pull over to get fuel with that vehicle. So it takes it back to OEM basically in that regard. So another big advantage of the fuel tank, and I know I could go on even in more detail, but I'm trying to move things along here, but one of the big advantages that we did at the time of installation, and you can see this in part one, is that we decided to go with an external fuel tank. The big advantage of this is that if you do have a situation where you get some bad fuel, then you will be able to quickly replace that external fuel filter. And we also upgraded our fuel pump while we were at it, since we had the canister out, since the tank was dropped and everything else. We replaced the fuel pump with a larger capacity fuel pump, which really works nicely with the fact that we're supercharged. We know that our larger volume fuel pump will be able to match the amount of fuel that the supercharger is requiring. So that's the other part of it. The unit that's inside of a fuel tank, and I'd like for you to research this yourself, of what it would take to replace the fuel pump, and also what it would be if the fuel filter actually did get clogged, or if you just want to replace it on a regular basis every 30,000 miles is what they recommend for those that offer superchargers. URD recommends every 30,000 miles. You're not going to want to drop your tank every 30,000 miles. That's going to end up being a big inconvenience to you. So the canister itself to replace a fuel filter on an OEM setup is around $600. So that's definitely not as cheap as just being able to replace a fuel filter. That's going to cost you less than $20. So there's going to be some savings there in the long run too. And if you were to get some bad fuel, and I've read many accounts on the forums of people that are out west, that get some bad fuel, they end up having to get towed to their nearest service center, and they have to drop the tank, and then it's several hundreds of dollars. If not, I think one guy ended up paying with tow and everything almost $500 for them to replace this fuel tank. Just in labor and tow, and then you got to figure another $500. So you're looking at about $1,000 repair if you end up getting some bad fuel. I know there's several of you out there that have experienced this, because I've seen a lot of it on the forums. So that would be another thing, and just being able to change it every 30,000 miles to ensure that your supercharger does not lean out at the worst time and actually do damage to the supercharger. That's also a really handy thing to be able to do. And buying good fuel too, like I kind of mentioned that earlier when being selective of what fuel station, but being able to not stop at the little mom and pop shop that really doesn't sell that much premium fuel, and that the fuel is maybe older than it should be in the tanks, and maybe they have even groundwater that comes in because it's an older fuel station and not a modern fuel station that has modern tanks. So just being able to be selective of where you actually stop. The security reasons also very important. If you end up pulling into a gas station and it just doesn't feel right, there's people loitering around. We've had this happen several times, but we ended up having to get fuel anyways, and that's just you know, basically creating a situation that you're exposing yourself to a possible confrontation or criminal activity when you pull into a place, but you have to get fuel there and you have no choice because you don't have a backup plan. And you know, now we'll definitely be getting fuel at a quarter of a tank because it's not that big of a deal, but we used to run it down as far as we could just because we would have to get fuel so often that it just really got old, and so we would end up getting fuel at an eighth a tank or less, or waiting even for the light to come on, which, you know, you see lots of folks on the forums say they do that all the time just to see how far they can go, and that's for security reasons and just the event that you would break down on the side of the road. It's just not safe, especially in construction zones. So having that extra capability is really important. Is the tank hard to install? That was another very popular question, and the answer to that is no, it's not. There's really nothing that is complicated about it. It will be more challenging for some folks than others because of their limited skills, but if you stay with the instructions, and also there's a forum post out there that is very helpful. We'll be doing a video that will actually be showing some more detail on the auxiliary tank install. There wasn't much detail on the main tank install, and we apologize for that. We didn't have the time to do it all ourselves, and so we were having a local shop to do it. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't do a lot of, but I really don't favor install videos per se, because I don't really want that liability for somebody just to watch the video and not get into the instructions and actually know how to do something properly. And so I never want to make an install video that is that's gonna have somebody that be very tempted in just watching the video and not reading the instructions, or even knowing the next step themselves and all the details of it, because they could do damage or something like that. And I really don't want that to happen, and for somebody to damage their vehicle and not be aware of how to do it and to do all the recommended steps. So that was really the bulk of the questions that we had. There was a lot of folks that were very interested in this product because of the fact that it is unique. It gives a lot of capability to your FJ. We've only taken one trip with it. Actually, that's wrong. We've taken 2 trips with it. My wife and I have only taken 1 trip with it, and that was the trip down to North Carolina. But I took a trip over to Indianapolis to do some video work over there for the LFD off-road video, and that was really awesome to be able to leave here near Columbus, drive all the way over to Indianapolis, actually past Indianapolis, west of Indianapolis, do the photo shoot, not fill up, and actually come back on 1 tank of fuel. To go that far on 1 tank of fuel with my vehicle, and I wasn't pulling a trailer, but that's just pretty much unheard of, and it was pretty cool to be able to do that. And I was kind of testing that out to see if I could do it or not, and I didn't have that much fuel left when I rolled into my exit, but I was able to do that. So I'm really happy with the product so far. I think it's a great quality product. I'm really looking forward to getting the auxiliary tank so I can install that and do another video for you guys on the auxiliary tank. I recommend that you guys check it out, and also just consider the fact that if you have not taken a big trip out west, or that maybe you live out west and that you haven't really experienced the idea that you're going to be somewhere remote and not be able to get fuel, or have experienced that, what I'm saying is that really consider the fact that this tank is going to eliminate the situation where you're not going to be able to go down that next road that you really want to go down, or stay out as long as you want to because you're out of fuel. And I know Expedition Overland, I recently spoke to them about that, and they said that one of their vehicles did have the long range tank and that their other vehicles don't, and they're actually going to be looking into that now. So they don't have to change their plans as much. And we all spend a lot of money on our rigs. We all spend a lot of money and time off to be able to go do the adventures that we want to do. And the idea that fuel is keeping you from staying out as long as you want to, or going down the road you'd really want to go down, or that next corner to turn, is something to consider, that this will be the answer to that, and give you a lot more capability that you really probably need if you're doing any serious overlanding or off-roading. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys. I know I rambled on. There's just really only one way to do this, and that's just a ramble on and one take, I guess. Hopefully you guys understand the format of it, and I appreciate you guys watching. Guys, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can see the next videos that we're coming out with. We're going to be coming out with some videos about transmission upgrades for Toyota vehicles, and also the auxiliary tank, and a bunch of other stuff that we have planned for future trips. And we will be at Overland Expo West in 2019, so if you're watching this video around that time in May of 2019, definitely come see us. We'll be at the Cruiser Brothers tent there, helping Cruiser Brothers promote their products that they do import into the United States. So everybody take care, be safe, and God bless.